a quiet therapy room, a folded piece of paper, a father who thought he had prepared himself for anything. But nothing could have prepared Prince William for the words his son had spoken. Words about Camilla that were never meant for royal ears. What George revealed wasn't childish confusion. It was something deeper. Something that cracked the composure of the future king and exposed a fracture inside the House of Windsor no one saw coming. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The envelope had been delivered discreetly, without ceremony, without announcement. It carried no royal crest, no dramatic seal, just the quiet gravity of confidentiality. The therapist had spoken carefully when handing it over earlier that day, voice measured but firm. "You need to hear this, sir. Not because it was scandalous, not because it was dangerous, but because it was honest. And honesty, inside royal walls, can be the most destabilizing force of all." William had waited until he was alone. No advisors, no aides, no Catherine, just silence and the weight of fatherhood pressing against his chest. He unfolded the transcript slowly, as if buying himself time, as if the act of delaying might soften what he was about to read. It didn't. The first lines were simple. George speaking in the halting but thoughtful cadence of a child trying to explain feelings too large for his years. There was no accusation in his tone, no bitterness, only clarity, and that clarity sliced deeper than anger ever could. "She feels far away," George had said about Camilla. Not mean, not cruel, just far. He described how rooms felt different when she entered, how his father's laughter shifted slightly, becoming tighter, almost practiced. He admitted he didn't fully understand why, but he felt it. Children always do. They sense temperature changes adults pretend aren't happening. They recognize emotional drafts no one else acknowledges. William's jaw tightened as he read those lines. His fingers trembled almost imperceptibly. It was the first visible crack in a composure he had trained himself to maintain since boyhood. The undertone wasn't hostility. It was distance. George wasn't rejecting Camilla. He was mapping the emotional terrain of his family. He spoke of Grandpa smiling differently, and of conversations that seemed to pause when he entered the room. He noticed what William believed he had hidden perfectly. The restraint, the polite diplomacy, the unresolved undercurrents that had never quite faded. And in that moment, William realized something chilling. The silence he had mastered had not protected his son. It had merely made the tension quieter. History, it seemed, had found a new voice. Another royal child observing dynamics too complex for bedtime explanations. Another generation navigating the delicate balance between loyalty and love. As William reread the transcript, a memory flickered uninvited. His own childhood confusion, the quiet strain between his parents, the sense of something unspoken lingering in every corridor. He had promised himself his children would grow up differently, shielded, grounded, emotionally secure. And yet here it was again, subtle, persistent, undeniable. His loyalty to his father weighed heavily. Charles had fought for this happiness, had endured public scorn to stand beside Camilla. William understood that, he respected it. But as a father, a new instinct surged stronger than tradition. Protect George. Protect his emotional clarity. Protect his innocence from inherited complexities. The transcript blurred slightly as his eyes burned. He wasn't breaking down because of scandal. He was breaking down because his son had quietly mirrored his own buried truths. And as the paper rested in his lap, heavy with meaning, one realization echoed louder than the rest. This was not just about Camilla. It was about cycles, about whether the next king would allow old wounds to define a new childhood. But to understand why those words hit so hard, we have to go back to a wound that never truly healed. Long before George ever whispered a word in therapy, William was a boy navigating his own confusion about the woman who would become queen. Cameras captured polite smiles. Headlines spoke of reconciliation. But behind palace walls, a young prince was trying to reconcile love for his father with loyalty to his mother's memory. The arrival of Camilla wasn't just a royal adjustment. It was an emotional earthquake that quietly shaped the man William became. As a teenager, William stood in the center of a storm he never created. The world had already chosen sides. Tabloids screamed. Commentators speculated. Strangers debated his family at breakfast tables as if they were characters in a soap opera. And through it all, he learned the first brutal lesson of royalty. Personal pain is public property. He watched as Camilla's name ignited fury beyond palace gates. Watched as every appearance beside his father became a calculated negotiation between image and loyalty. He was old enough to understand the tension, but too young to escape its gravity. Inside, the split was relentless. He adored his father. He felt the pull of that bond, the instinct to protect him from ridicule and shame. But he also carried his mother's memory like a sacred vow. Diana was not simply a parent. She was a symbol, a heartbeat the public refused to let fade. And William knew that whatever he expressed about Camilla would be measured against that memory. So he did what royal heirs are trained to do. He said very little. Palace staff noticed. They always do. The polite nods, the carefully neutral tone, the way he kept conversations brief but never hostile. It was diplomacy born from survival. Camilla, for her part, made quiet efforts. Invitations to join conversations. Attempts at humor. Gentle gestures meant to bridge an impossible divide. None of it was dramatic. None of it was cruel. But there was a stiffness that never quite dissolved. A hesitation that hovered like a question no one dared ask out loud. Publicly, unity was displayed with precision. Photographs were composed. Appearances were timed. The narrative was clear. The family had moved forward. Yet privately, William felt the discomfort of adjustment without emotional closure. He was expected to evolve faster than his grief, to accept change before he had fully processed loss. The monarchy demanded composure, and he delivered it. Again and again. There was an unspoken rule threading through it all. Feelings come second to the crown. Personal confusion must never disrupt institutional stability. So William became fluent in compartmentalization. He separated son from prince, memory from obligation, heart from duty. It was a skill that made him strong in public and guarded in private. And strength in that world was often mistaken for healing. But silence does not erase tension. It preserves it. It tucks it neatly beneath protocol until it hardens into something generational. William convinced himself he had mastered it, that his children would inherit stability rather than strain. Yet the emotional atmosphere of a family cannot be rewritten through willpower alone. It lingers in subtle glances, in restrained conversations, in the spaces between words. And as he grew into a husband, then a father, he carried those unspoken lessons with him. Believing he had neutralized their impact. He had not. Because children observe what adults disguise. They detect the quiet shifts in tone, the moments when laughter becomes slightly rehearsed. And what William once endured in silence would one day echo back to him through a smaller, softer voice, one untrained in diplomacy and unburdened by royal strategy. Decades later, that silence would be broken, not by William, but by his son. It was supposed to be routine, a private session, a safe space. But when George began speaking freely, the therapist realized this wasn't ordinary childhood reflection. The young prince spoke about Camilla in a way that startled even a seasoned professional. There was no malice, just clarity. And sometimes, clarity from a child is more explosive than scandal from an adult. George did not sound angry. He sounded thoughtful, careful, as if he were trying to solve a puzzle no one had explained to him. He spoke about feeling different when Camilla was around. Not in a dramatic way, but in the quiet language of a child trying to articulate emotional temperature. He said the air felt tighter. Conversations felt shorter. He couldn't name why, but he sensed a shift that made him shrink inward. That was what struck the therapist first. Not accusation, but adaptation. Then came the line that lingered. Daddy gets quiet when she's there. It was said plainly, without judgment. George wasn't criticizing his father, he was observing him. He described how William's voice changed ever so slightly, how his laughter sounded less spontaneous. To a child, those nuances are not political. They are personal, and in George's world, his father's emotional state was the barometer of safety. When William grew reserved, George felt it as a signal, even if he didn't understand the cause. As the session continued, George tried to explain Camilla's presence in terms he could grasp. "She feels like a story that makes everyone sad," he murmured at one point, almost apologetically. Not because she had done anything specific, not because he disliked her, but because her name seemed to carry weight in rooms that were otherwise light. He described family gatherings where smiles were bright but fragile, where certain topics vanished mid-sentence. He noticed how adults exchanged glances that children are not supposed to decode, yet always do. There was confusion in his questions. Who is in charge of what? Why does Grandpa act one way when it's just us, and another when she walks in? Why does it feel like something important happened before I was born, but no one talks about it? The hierarchy of royalty was complex enough. The hierarchy of emotion was even harder to navigate. George was not rebelling against structure. He was trying to understand it. And that effort, innocent and sincere, revealed more than any confrontation ever could. The therapist began to recognize patterns that stretched beyond one generation. Children absorbing tension not directed at them but circulating around them. Silence masquerading as stability. Loyalty complicated by history. George's words echoed themes that had surfaced before in quieter forms. The inheritance of unspoken grief, the careful management of narrative over nuance. This was not about villainy, it was about emotional residue. Then came the line that would later stop William cold. Grandpa smiles different when she walks in. It was observational, almost analytical. George had noticed the micro-shift in expression, the recalibration of posture and tone. It was not condemnation, it was awareness. And awareness, when voiced by a child, can dismantle years of carefully maintained composure. The therapist understood the gravity of what had been said. Confidentiality is sacred. Trust is foundational. But so is prevention. If a child is internalizing tension, a parent must know. The dilemma was immediate and heavy. Share too much, and risk disrupting family equilibrium. Share too little, and allow emotional confusion to deepen. After careful consideration, one conclusion became unavoidable. William needed to hear his son's truth before silence shaped it into something heavier. Because once spoken, those words could not simply dissolve into therapy notes. They demanded reckoning. They demanded reflection. And when those words reached William's hands, something inside him began to unravel. William has faced grief before. He has buried a mother under the gaze of the world. He has endured scandal, betrayal, and relentless scrutiny. But this was different. This was his son, reflecting emotions William had buried for years. As he reread George's words, the future king wasn't thinking about protocol. He was thinking about history repeating itself, and whether he had failed to stop it. He read the transcript once, then again, then a third time, slower, as if repetition might change the meaning. Certain phrases clung to him. Daddy gets quiet. She feels like a story that makes everyone sad. Grandpa smiles different. They weren't explosive statements. They were gentle observations. And somehow, that made them devastating. Because they were true in ways William had never allowed himself to articulate. For years, he had convinced himself that discipline could erase tension, that composure could neutralize memory. He believed he had built a stable world for his children, one insulated from the fractures of the past. Yet George had sensed what William thought he had concealed flawlessly. The restraint. The slight tightening in his chest when Camilla entered a room. The careful calibration of tone around his father. It had all been invisible to adults trained in royal discretion. But not to a child. The guilt came swiftly. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just heavy. Had he unknowingly passed down the very confusion he once endured? He had sworn his children would never grow up decoding emotional undercurrents the way he did. He had promised himself there would be no silent wars lingering in hallways, no grief disguised as diplomacy. And yet here was his son, mapping the emotional architecture of a family still carrying unresolved history. Memories surfaced without permission. His mother's vulnerability. The way Diana's pain had sometimes hovered in rooms even when she was smiling. the way he and Harry learned to read adults before they learned algebra. William had told himself that strength meant silence, that enduring quietly was noble. But reading George's words, he saw the flaw in that logic. Silence does not dissolve tension. It simply transfers it. A deeper fear crept in. What if George began to internalize confusion about loyalty? What if he felt torn between affection and unspoken distance? William knew the cost of that split. It creates careful children, observant children, children who learn to manage the emotions of others before understanding their own. He would not allow that legacy to repeat. He could not. And then came the question he had avoided for years, one he never thought he would confront so directly. Does Camilla truly belong within the emotional core of his son's world? Not as queen, not as his father's wife, but as a figure inside George's inner circle of trust. The thought felt disloyal, almost treacherous, yet fatherhood had shifted his priorities. Titles mattered less than emotional safety. Tradition mattered less than clarity. For a brief, unguarded moment, the composure fractured. His eyes stung. Tears did not fall dramatically. They gathered. Restrained, but undeniable. This was not weakness. It was reckoning. He was simultaneously the son of a complicated past and the father of a fragile future, pulled between loyalty to Charles and instinct to protect George, bound by history, yet desperate to rewrite it. And as that realization settled into something heavier than grief, William understood that this was no longer a private emotional tremor. It was the beginning of a shift, one that would ripple beyond him, beyond George, beyond a single therapy transcript. Because inside those palace walls, awareness changes dynamics. And William's breakdown wasn't the only storm gathering inside palace walls. Camilla has survived decades of public hostility. She knows what it feels like to be the outsider in her own kingdom. But this time, the tension wasn't coming from tabloids, it was coming from a child. And whether she knew the details or not, she sensed the shift. The warmth had cooled. The glances had changed. Something in the palace air felt heavier. She had built her resilience slowly, brick by brick, scandal by scandal. Public disapproval had once been thunderous, almost theatrical. Over time, she learned how to endure it. She mastered patience. She wore calm like armor. She understood that acceptance in royal life is rarely immediate. It is negotiated over years. But this was different. This was not a headline or a protest. It was a subtle emotional withdrawal from the man who would one day be king. William had never been openly hostile. He was too disciplined for that. Yet recently his tone carried distance. Conversations shortened. Invitations felt more formal. Camilla noticed because she had spent years studying emotional temperature shifts, always alert to where she stood in the hierarchy of affection. Now there was something restrained in him again. A quiet recalibration that felt deliberate. Family gatherings became slightly strained. Nothing dramatic. No confrontations. Just pauses that lingered a fraction too long. Charles would attempt to lighten the mood, unaware or perhaps unwilling to acknowledge the undercurrent. Camilla sensed it in the way William held George closer during conversations, in the way topics seemed to redirect whenever she approached. She did not know the exact words spoken in therapy, but she could feel their ripple. Charles stood between them, though he may not have realized how visibly. His loyalty to his wife was unwavering, hard-earned through decades of defiance and devotion. Yet his bond with William was blood-deep, anchored in legacy and shared vulnerability. When William grew distant, Charles felt it as a quiet alarm. Camilla saw that too. She recognized the subtle strain in her husband's voice when father and son disagreed over matters too minor to justify the tension they carried. And beneath her composure, an old fear stirred. What if she would never fully belong? Not as a public figure, she had accepted that battle long ago, but within the private emotional circle of this family. She had earned her title. She had endured scrutiny. But emotional integration cannot be granted by ceremony. It must be felt. And now she wondered if it ever truly had been. Publicly, she remained steady, confident, poised. She spoke with warmth. She fulfilled her duties with grace. The image was stable, reassuring. But privately, there was isolation in being queen without unfiltered acceptance. She understood that George's generation represented the future, If the youngest heir felt distance, what did that mean for her place in the unfolding story of this monarchy? There were moments when she questioned whether William knew more than he was revealing, whether his restraint was protective rather than polite, whether George's comments had reached him and shifted something fundamental. She did not need confirmation to sense that a recalculation was happening. And generational tension, once stirred, does not simply retreat. The past had shaped her role in William's life. Now it seemed poised to shape her relationship with his children as well. The monarchy prides itself on continuity, yet continuity can also mean inherited discomfort. And as the emotional fault lines subtly widened, one truth became impossible to ignore. This was no longer just about perception. It was about belonging. And at the center of it all stood King Charles, torn between wife and son. For King Charles, this wasn't merely family discomfort. It was legacy on the line. His marriage to Camilla had cost him public trust once before. Now, the fracture threatened to echo through the next generation. When whispers of William's reaction reached him, Charles understood something chilling. History was circling back, and this time, it involved his grandson. He noticed the change before anyone dared to name it. William's tone had grown measured, more deliberate. Invitations were accepted, but warmth felt filtered. Conversations about family became shorter, more controlled. Charles had lived long enough inside emotional storms to recognize the early tremors of another one forming. And what unsettled him most was not confrontation, it was restraint. Restraint meant something was being protected or suppressed. The memory of the Diana years lingered like a warning. Charles had spent decades attempting to rebuild both his image and his private life. He had fought for Camilla, endured scrutiny, and finally stepped into a version of happiness that felt hard-earned. The last thing he wanted was to reopen wounds that had nearly broken the monarchy before. Yet when he learned that George's therapy session had prompted William's visible distress, a familiar fear stirred. Not scandal, not headlines, but repetition. He was loyal to Camilla without hesitation. She had stood beside him through public condemnation and slow rehabilitation. Their bond had survived pressure that would have shattered most marriages. But his instinct toward William was different. It was ancient, instinctive, unshakable. William was not just his son. He was the future of the crown. If William felt compelled to set emotional distance for his child's sake, Charles had to take that seriously, even if it hurt. Their private conversation was measured but tense. No raised voices. No dramatic accusations. Instead, there was careful language, chosen words carrying enormous weight. William spoke with controlled resolve, emphasizing George's emotional clarity without placing blame. He did not attack Camilla. He did not accuse his father. But he made one thing unmistakably clear. His priority was his son's emotional well-being, even if that required subtle adjustments within the family dynamic. Charles listened, truly listened. And in that silence, he felt the fragile balance he had spent years stabilizing begin to shift. He realized that this was no longer about past controversies. It was about perception inside the next generation. If George felt tension, it meant the family had not fully reconciled what they believed was resolved. That realization unsettled him more than any tabloid ever could. The monarchy thrives on unity. Public fracture invites speculation. And speculation breeds instability. Charles understood that even the hint of generational division could ignite narratives beyond their control. Optics mattered. Appearances mattered. But beneath the strategy, there was something more personal. The fear of losing harmony within his own family. For a fleeting moment, Charles confronted an uncomfortable question. Had his pursuit of personal happiness inadvertently complicated the emotional inheritance of his heirs? It was not regret. It was reflection. He had chosen love over perception once before. Now he was being asked, quietly, whether that choice carried consequences beyond his lifetime. The pressure was immense. Maintain loyalty to his wife. Preserve trust with his son. Protect the image of stability the monarchy projected to the world. All while navigating the fragile awareness of a child who had simply spoken what he felt. Charles understood that forcing resolution would only deepen the divide. Yet ignoring it risked allowing emotional distance to calcify. And so he stood at the center of a delicate triangle: husband, father, king, each role demanding something different. The path forward required nuance, patience, and restraint. But beneath politics and protocol, one question haunted William more than any other. William has spent his life studying the past, not academically but emotionally. He knows what unresolved tension can do to a royal child. As George's words echoed in his mind, one realization cut deeper than all the rest. This was his chance to do something different. To respond not as a prince, but as a father determined to break a generational cycle. For years, William had equated strength with restraint. He believed composure was protection, that if he remained steady, controlled, immovable, the emotional tremors of the past would never reach his children. But George's quiet honesty exposed the flaw in that thinking. Silence had not shielded his son. It had merely created space for confusion to grow unchecked. And so, for the first time, William chose not to retreat inward. He chose to lean in. He began with something deceptively simple: conversation. Not formal discussions heavy with royal language, but open exchanges shaped by curiosity and patience. He asked George what he meant when he said things felt different. He listened without correcting, without explaining away. He allowed his son's feelings to exist without defending anyone involved. That shift alone marked a profound departure from the emotional culture William himself had inherited. There were boundaries set quietly but firmly. Family gatherings would not carry undercurrents unaddressed. If tension existed, it would be softened through honesty, rather than concealed beneath etiquette. William understood that children do not need every detail of adult history, but they do need clarity. He reframed Camilla's presence not as a complicated symbol, but as a person with her own place in the family. Not replacing anyone. Not rewriting history. Simply existing within it. In doing so, William found himself revisiting memories of his mother, not with sorrow, but with instruction. Diana had worn her vulnerability openly. She had not hidden her emotions behind titles. For years, William had feared that such openness invited chaos. Now he saw another possibility. Perhaps vulnerability, handled wisely, could prevent it. Perhaps transparency was not weakness, but resilience in its most honest form. The shift was subtle, but meaningful. William no longer viewed emotional steadiness as suppression. He redefined it as guidance. He allowed George to express confusion without guilt. He validated his observations without turning them into accusations. And in that delicate balance, he felt something unfamiliar but steady, control rooted in compassion rather than containment. This was not about dismantling tradition. It was about evolving it. The monarchy has always adapted to survive. Wars, scandals, social revolutions, it has recalibrated each time. Now, the evolution was internal. Emotional literacy replacing emotional silence. Dialogue replacing distance. William recognized that the strength of the crown would not be measured solely by ceremony, but by the psychological stability of those who would wear it. For the first time since reading the transcript, hope surfaced alongside concern. The cycle did not have to repeat. George did not have to inherit unresolved tension. And Camilla's role, while complex, could be reshaped within a narrative of openness rather than quiet division. It required patience. It required courage. But it was possible. Yet even as healing began privately, the public narrative was on the verge of exploding. The monarchy has survived wars, abdications, scandals, and heartbreak. But what truly tests its endurance isn't politics. It's family. A child's therapy session may never make headlines. William's tears may never be officially acknowledged. But within palace walls, something shifted. The future king confronted not just his son's words, but the emotional truth of his own past. And that reckoning may quietly redefine the crown itself. For centuries, the institution has thrived on stoicism. Emotion was something to master, not display. Personal conflict was absorbed silently, so the symbol of continuity remained untouched. Yet beneath the rituals and the regalia, a transformation has begun. Subtle, almost invisible, but profound. Emotional transparency, once considered risky, is emerging as a quiet strength within the next generation of leadership. William's response to George's words was not explosive. It was intentional. And intention, in a family bound by history, can shift the trajectory of legacy. There is symbolism in this moment that stretches beyond one family disagreement. A future king choosing dialogue over suppression. A father acknowledging inherited tension rather than denying it. This is not rebellion against tradition. It is refinement of it. The crown has always adapted in order to endure. Now it is adapting inwardly, recognizing that emotional intelligence may be as vital to survival as political neutrality once was. Balancing Camilla's place within this evolving dynamic requires nuance. She remains queen. She remains Charles's chosen partner. That reality does not disappear because a child feels distance. But what changes is the approach. William understands that acceptance cannot be commanded. It must be cultivated gently, especially for George's generation. He is not rewriting history, he is reframing its impact. Camilla's role will not be defined by past controversy but by present interaction, measured and mindful. This recalibration signals something larger. The monarchy, long perceived as emotionally distant, is quietly embracing self-awareness. Not for optics, not for public approval, but because internal stability demands it. William's renewed resolve as heir is no longer focused solely on duty in the traditional sense. It now includes emotional stewardship, ensuring that the next king grows up grounded, not guarded. That shift may never be announced formally, yet it carries enormous weight. George, too, stands at the center of this evolution. He is growing up in a household where questions are answered rather than dismissed, where feelings are explored rather than hidden, where loyalty and honesty can coexist. That environment does not erase complexity, but it reduces confusion. And in doing so, it strengthens the foundation of a future monarch who will understand both ceremony and self. There is unseen power in confronting private truths. It does not produce dramatic headlines or immediate transformation. Instead, it works quietly, reshaping relationships, redefining boundaries, softening rigid traditions. William's decision to break the cycle may not be recorded in royal archives, but its impact could echo for decades. A monarchy that learns from its emotional history rather than denying it becomes more resilient, not less. And perhaps that is the greatest revelation of all. The crown is not threatened by honesty, it is fortified by it. Behind the formal portraits and carefully curated appearances, real conversations are unfolding. Generational awareness is taking root. Strength is being redefined not as silence, but as courage to engage. Because in the House of Windsor, it isn't always scandal that changes history. Sometimes, it's a child's honest words. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.